What they said, though, is that we have to create rules and regulations for conduct, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing that. We're going to write them up right now. It's not a big deal. And if he misbehaves, we'll throw him out, or we'll stop the news conference.
What are your rules going to be? What is it that you're saying?
They're doing them now.
This is over the line, and you lose your
they're
press.
doing them now. I mean, we'll have rules of decorum. You know, you can't keep asking questions. We had a lot of reporters in that room, many reporters in that room, and they were unable to ask questions because this guy gets up and starts, you know, doing what he's supposed to be doing for him and for CNN, and, you know, just shouting out questions and making statements too. But I will say this: look. Nobody believes in the First Amendment more than I do. And if I think somebody's acting out of sorts, I will leave. I'll say, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you coming, and I'll leave.
And that's exactly what he should do. He doesn't need to call on Jim Acosta. I mean, especially if Jim Acosta is going to act like that, right? I do believe that you need to treat the President of the United States with a certain amount of respect. After all, the American people elected him. And if you respect the American people, you respect the President of the United States. I'll tell you, if I did an interview with President Obama, or even today with President Barack Obama, whether it's Obama, whether it's Trump, whether it's Clinton, whoever it is, anybody who has been the President of the United States deserves some decorum. You don't shout. You don't grab the microphone and not turn it over when someone tries to take it from you. I mean, that is not acceptable behavior. And these are things that these reporters should know. But if they don't, perhaps he needs to train them a little. And if things get wild, just say, okay, you know, enough. I'll come back tomorrow. Here with me now, former special assistant to President Trump, Marc Lotter, and former Democratic Alabama congressional candidate, Mallory Hagan. Good to see you both. Marc, starting with you, what do you think of my sense of this? And do you agree with what the president's saying as well tonight? In other words, this is not over, and we'll see how it plays out. But there is a certain kind of decorum, right, that you want to have when you're in the White House at a press conference.
Absolutely. I trained to be a journalist when I was in college and had the privilege of serving as a journalist for the first 12 years or so of my professional life before moving to politics. And the rule number one is don't be the story. You're supposed to be reporting on the story, not becoming the story. And I'll give a lot of credit. Major Garrett, who obviously used to work for Fox News, now is CBS News correspondent, he was handed the microphone when he thought the president called on him, but actually the president was calling on someone behind him. He turned around and gave the reporter that microphone. He didn't grandstand. He didn't whine. He didn't ask his questions anyway, just because he had the microphone. There are certain standards and protocols in place, and it's good that they're going to be writing them down and be able to take action for those who violate them.
Crazy that it's come to this, though, Mallory, right?
Well, you know, I think it's really interesting that our president uses the word decorum, because I think the American people could really use some of that from him. If he wants a room full of people to operate with decorum, then perhaps he should start leading by example. And I think that's what the American people are craving. And so I would love to see him act with some decorum, and then perhaps the press that's in the room with him will follow suit.
See, I watched that press conference. I thought he actually had a lot of decorum. I mean, at one point I was a little bit worried because you saw Jim Acosta holding on for dear life to that microphone, and that young woman that tried to take it away from him, and he kept holding on. And it struck me as an incredibly awkward, difficult moment. And I wondered if the president was actually going to come down off the platform and take the microphone away from Jim Acosta himself. And unfortunately, he didn't. I think he walked away a little bit, then came back. I actually thought that he's shown some pretty decent decorum in a lot of these press conferences. It's not easy, Marc, when you got reporter after reporter screaming at you, yelling at you. I mean, that's one thing in a gaggle, right? One thing in a gaggle, an entirely different thing when you are seated in a traditional style press conference.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, he took 68 questions from, I think, 30-plus outlets for over an hour and a half. That is a lot of decorum.
That's a lot of questions.
And that is something that even many White House correspondents will tell you. They have more access to President Trump than they ever did to Presidents Obama, President George W. Bush. And to the previous point, I think one of the reasons why President Trump was elected was because he was beyond decorum. He actually was about action, not just saying the right things, doing the right thing.
Look, Mallory, you know this well, and you just competed there in a congressional race in Alabama. But you know, Hillary Clinton has said, "Well, we don't need to be civil, right? We don't need to be civil until we win. We can't be civil until we win." What kind of message is that sending to some members of the mainstream and left wing, for that matter, media?
Well, as a former anchor and journalist myself, I think we all need to recognize that a journalist's job is to get to the truth. So whether President Trump likes the questions that are coming his way or not, the appropriate thing and the decorum that he should approach that topic with is one where he answers it. The American people deserve answers. And what it says to me is that we have lost civility on both sides of the aisle. I'm held to a higher standard as a former Miss America than our president is. And I don't think that that's fair. We need to bring decorum back to the office of the president, and I think that he can start by leading through example.
Well, I'd certainly like to see the press act a little more respectful at times, too. They should ask the questions they need to ask. And you know what? I think you can all look at my interview. My interview where I pressed him repeatedly on things like Helsinki that I had a lot of questions on, as well as a whole host of other topics. And you know what? We did it in a civilized fashion. And that matters right now. Marc and Mallory, thank you.